Welcome to 204B Part 2, where we're going to be looking at interpreting the nameplate information that's on the contactors and relays. Whenever I'm looking at the nameplate information on any type of relay or contactor, I should be able to find two different types of information. First of all, I'm going to find information on my coil itself. The coil usually is only ever rated in volts and whether or not that coil is going to be AC or DC. And we need to be able to make sure that we can identify that. The other thing I'm going to be looking for is any ratings on my contacts. And the contacts will have a lot more ratings associated with them, including voltage, amperage, horsepower, duty, the arrangement and the style, the contact terminal numbering, and whether or not it's an NEMA or an IEC design. Whenever we look at the side of our relays, this is the typical type of information we're going to be able to find there. We should find something on our coil ratings, and that's typically going to be what the voltage and whether or not it's going to be AC and DC. We won't find any current rating for the coil because the current rating for the coil is so very low, it's really not worth listing. Some models will also have the system frequency, so whether or not it's meant to work on a 50 Hz or 60 Hz system. We'll also find all the ratings for my contacts. The contact ratings are going to be for my voltage, whether or not it's AC or DC, and also for the maximum ampacity those contacts are rated to operate at. It's also going to give me my contact orientation, being either normally open or normally closed. The other thing we can see on this one is a pin diagram. The pin diagram is related to the pins on the top of the relay, and it can tell us where is the common terminal, where is my normally open and normally closed contacts, and also where do I hook up my wires for my coil. When it comes to identifying where to terminate the wires on a relay, manufacturers use a numbering system. However, different manufacturers will use a different terminal numbering system. Also, note the different symbols that they use for the coil. Make sure you're always using the manufacturer's wiring diagrams. This will give you the proper way to do the connections. These wiring diagrams are often found either on the side or the top of the relay, but they can also be found in supporting papers as well. There is a lot more information found on the nameplate of my contactors. When I'm looking at my contactors, there's a few different things I need to be able to identify. The first thing is what my power contacts are rated at. And here's where I find not only the horsepower rating, but my maximum voltage rating. I can always use smaller values than this, but I cannot exceed these values. If you remember when we looked at our schematic diagrams, we are able to separate my schematics into control circuit and power circuit. These contacts would be found in the power circuit and are called the power contacts inside the contactor. The other voltage value I should be able to recognize is my control circuit voltage, and this is also the voltage of my coil. It's very important that I match this voltage for my control circuit. I should not be using anything less or more than this, but my control circuit must be 120 volts. Some of the other information I should be able to find is how many phases this particular contactor can handle, what the maximum rated current of the contactor is, and also any product certifications and a maximum operational voltage level. There should also be a notation somewhere for the auxiliary contact composition, which tells me how many other contacts I have besides my power contacts. These auxiliary contacts are typically found on the very top of the contactors beside the connection points to my coil. In this case, I have one normally open and one normally closed. We can order a contactor with any number of different auxiliary contacts added to it, and some contactors we can put auxiliary decks on the side to give us more auxiliary contacts. When you're actually looking at the side of a relay, and this is one from our lab, it is sometimes hard to identify which parts of this you need to pay attention to and which parts of this have no value to you at all. If you are ever in doubt, simply go to the website of the manufacturer and download their spec sheet from there, and that will give you all the information that you will need for that particular contactor or relay. Be aware that the coil rating for your relay or contactor might be found in a completely different place than the nameplate value for all your power contacts. So make sure you take a good look at the entire relay in order to make sure you find where the voltage rating for the coil is. Make sure you don't exceed the voltage rating, and make sure you know the difference between AC or DC operation. The contacts within the relay or contactor can be listed according to different voltages and horsepower ratings, and it will either have a kilowatt or an amperage rating that coincides with the voltage. The contacts themselves inside the relay can be identified with either a diagram or form style. Both Form A and Form B are single pole, single throw contacts, which means that I have a single input called my single pole, and I have a single output, which is referred to as my single throw. A Form A contact is a normally open contact, and a Form B is going to be a normally closed contact. Form C contacts are typically found inside our plug-in relays, and these are single pole, double throw. This means that I have one input and I have two different options for my output. Typically, these would be normally open, normally closed contacts. Form X and Form Y are very similar to Form A and Form B. However, Form A and B are single make, single break, meaning there's only one contact point that's opening and closing. With Form X and Form Y, these are double make and double break, meaning that I actually have 2 points of contact that are connecting my incoming and my outgoing line, so my pole to my throw. And as I energize and de-energize my contactor or my relay, I'm actually opening up and closing 2 different points. A lot of control relays will usually use a combination between Form X and Form Y, where I can have a single pole, double throw, normally open, normally closed contact. You've now reached the end of 204B Part 2. Make sure you review your module and become very familiar with not only the information that can be found on the nameplate, but also what all the different forms of contacts are. Make sure you have a solid understanding of the terminology in this section, and then continue on to 204B Part 3.